Sure, Brian already introduced me. I am excited to be able to give my presentation this way. I'm sorry about my video not working, or the platform, the Kaltura Media platform I'm using is not cooperating. So I am going to do a screencast um, of my screen. I am really excited about teaching the Global Scholar Spanish. Too many times, students think about language learning as just one more hoop to jump through to complete the language requirement. But the guaranteed opportunity to study abroad really changes the dynamics of class participation and studying Spanish with the goal to communicate. It also challenges me to know that I've got to get students ready to be able to communicate in Spanish with native speakers. First, I want to talk about the stakes of Global Scholar Spanish. What do we stand to gain when students have a real immediate goal of speaking Spanish? It's easier for the instructor and the students to find meaning in what we do in the class, since only when learning is meaningful will students be intrinsically motivated to learn the new materia, and it's immediate for them, this goal. I use the word cultural competence, but what I really mean is transcultural competence. Students engage across cultures, not just in the in between. We talk about multiple cultures within a mainstream culture, not just the target culture versus the home culture. In the case of Ecuador, we are looking forward to examining Afro-Ecuadorian, indigenous Ecuadorian cultures, and immigrant communities in Ecuador, in addition to the mainstream Ecuadorian culture. This way, more students can see themselves reflected in the cultures we study and by examining the experiences of Latinx people in and outside the US to broaden their perspectives. I can tell you that I already have a special relationship with the Global Scholar students, partly because they are a cohort, and partly because I want them to be ready. Um, I want them to be ready for Ecuador, and also because they already have a group of faculty who are happy and willing to mentor them. Students have reported that they hope to study abroad again as upperclassmen, and we hope this program serves as a springboard for future global experiences. My colleague Janice Rodriguez, who is now retired, and I created an open textbook under the Creative Commons license because we didn't want the cost of the textbook to be an issue for our mostly first generation student body. Although it focuses on US Latinos, I supplement with cultural readings and products from Ecuador. This focus is on transcultural communication, where students interpret meaning not only based on what is being said, but what are the sociocultural contexts behind the target language speech acts. When we first envisioned the textbook, we were inspired by my, our colleague John Pankratz's photo exhibit of faces in our city, many of them local Latinx members. This is the spirit we try to replicate in the book, where every individual has a voice and a face, and they all form a community. Talking about communities, it's one of the goals, one of the world readiness standards set by the American Council on the Teaching of Foreign Languages. Communities, which involves using learning beyond the classroom and lifelong learning. Since students will also engage in fun in Ecuador, this program uniquely meets the second part of the community's goal, where they're using Spanish for their own enjoyment and enrichment. In the textbook, there is an emphasis on knowing where countries and cities are located in the Spanish speaking world because, as informed global citizens, students can understand what geographical realities are reflected in the target culture. Geography plays a big role in critically thinking about how our place and position inform our perception of the world. On the left side, you will find the chapters of the textbook, and on the right, there is an example of an activity that asks students to describe the city our college is in. I then ask students to compare cities of the Spanish-speaking world, including Cuenca in terms of demographics, sorry, and also what the cities have to offer. The purpose of these activities is for them to see the connections and also the nuances of different global cities. Transcultural communication becomes more important now that machine translation becomes increasingly more accurate. In this first image on the left, you'll see the word intercultural communication, but I'm really trying to go beyond that and have them look at transcultural, which is across languages, not just in between or in between cultures, the multiple cultures that every individual inhabits. Students need to be able to investigate products and practices to understand cultural perspectives. This piece has been missing from standardized textbooks. Our students learn to compare in linguistically sophisticated ways, and I provide can do statements at the end of each lesson so I can see where students are struggling and adjust from there. And this course has different levels, so I'm constantly assigning different parallel assignments to students at different language levels to meet them where they are. Are you thinking about a similar program at your college? One idea is to start with your institution's general education goals. Ours are knowing the world, engaging the world, and understanding the world. Some of the key terms are a broad foundation, thinking critically, and informed engagement. And I think about these keywords when I am designing my class activities. How do they meet these general education goals? Even if your program doesn't go abroad, you can think about the community resources available to you, um, thinking about how you're going to build the project or what kinds of community projects you want to incorporate. Maybe with the Latinx community if you decide to have a language component. Here are some of the questions considered that we considered when we built the content for the textbook. What resources are available to us? What do we want students to not only understand but to appreciate? And this is a lofty goal, yes, but we can think about those action verbs of learning objectives and how we get to closer to appreciating the target culture. What themes and topics have you already developed that were successful? How can students go beyond basic biographical material to create community connections? So we're not only talking about ourselves, but we're talking about other people. And we're talking about the products and the practices that other people engage in. In what ways can the content be used for interpretive, presentational, and interpersonal communication? And always um, that's always part of designing the lesson. What grammar and vocabulary do students need to engage with the content? So if it's something that's very complex, then I'm scaffolding the lesson so they can talk about something that is kind of complex and making sure that the content um, is something that is going to help them develop transcultural competence. I keep going back to the word transcultural competence because it's very important for me. You can learn a language and not really understand and not really be able to move across cultures and move across languages. So that is what I want students to walk away with. And in this last section, I just want to show some examples of activities. In this activity, we look at how the standard Mercator projection is not really accurate because a globe is going to be distorted when we make it flat. And we talk about how our perception of the world is based on colonial borders, not necessarily the geographical features and borders established by pre-colonial indigenous groups. So having them think about our world and how we perceive it. We explore how Spanish is spoken in meaningful quantities in places students would never even think about, such as in Western Africa and Equatorial Guinea. in Western Sahara. Part of transcultural competence is dispelling myths and expanding our knowledge about the world. In this activity, students explore the original map of Mexico and explain the ways Mexican Americans make up the largest Latinx group and what Puerto Rico's status even means. Even in a 101 kind of class, a first semester language course, students are engaging in deeper thinking about the world. This is an ad from Absolute Vodka. Of course, this ad didn't go over well in the US, but it did in Mexico. This is the original map of 1830 of Mexico before the US moved the border. And students learn to see the world from different perspectives. These kinds of activities get students thinking and noticing things that otherwise are just given to them as trivia to memorize in traditional language textbooks. We just did this activity last week in class. Students had already learned who made the maps, and uh, we used today, and then had to explain the point of this drawing by avant-garde Uruguayan artist Joaquin Torres Garcia. As you can see, my students can explain how one's positionality, their experiences, identity, and culture, and geography inform their worldview. Being able to see the world from different viewpoints allows them to think more critically to solve problems, clear up misunderstandings, and identify with people different from themselves. Some of the student projects are meant to foster knowing the world, engaging the world, and understanding the world. So we have basic, regular presentations on Ecuadorian food, history, and places. I also have a student designing games um, on Spanish speaking world, on aspects of the Spanish speaking world. So right now she just designed a kind of video game on typical dishes of different Spanish speaking countries. And students are writing poems and song lyrics. On the text we explore, we just look at Calle 13's Latinoamerica, which is a Puerto Rican group, a rap group, and they tried to come up with their own rap or their own lyrics. We are examining cultural products and practices in English, Spanish, and Spanglish. And I say Spanglish also because what we're doing in the 101, they don't have all of the language and vocabulary to express sophisticated, analyses of cultural products. But I have them bring in the vocabulary, bring in those words in Spanish, um, and then um, and then as we go on, they will be able to operate 100% in Spanish when they talk about the products. And then for the communication activities, those are done 100% in Spanish. But sometimes when we analyze, we're using a lot of Spanglish. And then sharing cultural aspects from their own culture with Ecuadorian students. I don't know if Brian talked about the flip grid, but students have asynchronous chats with their Ecuadorian buddies, and that so then when they go to Ecuador, they will already know some familiar faces, and they can practice their language. So the Ecuadorians will practice their English, and the our students will practice Spanish and practice listening to Spanish. So that is it. I want to thank you for letting me participate in this way. You're free to email me for any questions, and have a great conference.